I stared at my phone screen, my hands trembling so violently that I almost dropped it. The notification banner glowed in the darkness of my apartment at 2 a.m. It was a voice message from my mother, Carol. Her voice dripped with venom through the speaker. "You ungrateful little bitch. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? You're going to regret embarrassing this family. Richard is contacting his lawyer tomorrow. We're going to destroy you." The message ended with my father's voice in the background slurring something about pressing charges for assault and property damage. My nose still throbbed from where my mother had slapped me just hours earlier, and I could feel the bruises forming on my back where my father had shoved me into their antique crystal liquor cabinet. But here's the thing. They had no idea what was coming. Because this time I had evidence. This time I had witnesses. And this time I wasn't backing down. If you've ever dealt with toxic family members who thought they could control you forever, stick around for this story. And if you enjoy watching entitled people get exactly what they deserve, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. I should have known Thanksgiving was going to be a disaster the moment I pulled into my parents' driveway in their upscale Connecticut neighborhood. The house loomed before me, a pristine colonial with perfect landscaping and a 3-car garage, the kind of house that screamed old money and family values. But I knew better. Behind that perfect facade was a family that had been bleeding me dry for years, always taking, never giving, and making me feel guilty for even existing. My name is Avery, and for 28 years I've been the family scapegoat, the responsible one, the one who was supposed to sacrifice everything for my younger sister Brielle, the golden child who could do no wrong. While I worked 2 jobs to put myself through community college and now struggled under $30,000 in student loans, Brielle had gotten a full ride to a private university courtesy of Mum and Dad. While I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic, Brielle cruised around in a brand new Mercedes that my parents leased for her. And while I lived in a tiny studio apartment and ate ramen 3 nights a week, Brielle lived in a luxury high-rise downtown, funded entirely by our parents, while she played at being an influencer and tried to launch her boutique clothing business. The inequality had always been there, simmering beneath the surface of every family gathering. But I'd convinced myself it was fine. I had convinced myself that love wasn't measured in dollars, that maybe my parents just related better to Brielle's bubbly personality, that I was being too sensitive. I had swallowed my hurt for years, shown up to every holiday with a smile plastered on my face, and pretended that everything was perfectly normal. As I walked up the stone pathway to the front door, carrying the chocolate cream pie, I had painstakingly made from scratch at 6 a.m. because Carol had specifically requested I bring dessert. I tried to shake off the knot of anxiety in my stomach. I was already running on fumes. Just 2 weeks earlier, my cat Milo had gotten severely ill and needed emergency surgery. The vet bill had been $4,200. I had maxed out my credit card and was now facing the reality of how I was going to eat for the rest of the month while making minimum payments. I had lost sleep, cried myself through panic attacks, and seriously considered taking out a payday loan just to keep my head above water. I hadn't told my parents about Milo. They had made it abundantly clear over the years that my problems were just that. My problems. The last time I had asked for help 3 years ago when my car broke down and I needed $800 for repairs to get to work, my father Richard had lectured me for 20 minutes about financial responsibility before grudgingly writing a check and making me sign a promissory note like I was some kind of business loan. I had paid him back within 4 months with interest just to get him off my back. Meanwhile, Brielle had totaled 2 cars in the past 5 years, and my parents had simply bought her new ones without a second thought. I rang the doorbell and my mother opened it almost immediately. She looked immaculate as always, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing an expensive cashmere sweater in deep burgundy and pearl earrings that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her eyes flickered to the pie in my hands and her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. "You're late," she said coldly, not bothering with a greeting. "Everyone's already seated." "I'm actually right on time," I said, checking my watch. It was exactly 4 o'clock, the time she had told me to arrive. "You said 4. "I said 3:30, she snapped. "But of course you weren't listening. You never listen." She turned on her heel and walked back into the house, leaving me standing in the doorway. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, my heart already sinking. This was how it always started. Some manufactured slight, some way to make me feel like I had already failed before I even took off my coat. I followed her through the foyer, past the sweeping staircase and the formal living room that no one was ever allowed to actually sit in, toward the dining room. I could hear the buzz of conversation, the clink of glasses, the forced laughter that always accompanied these family gatherings. My stomach churned. There were going to be at least 30 people here. Extended family, friends, neighbours. My mother loved an audience. As I entered the dining room, I was struck by how elaborately everything was decorated. The long mahogany table was set with my mother's finest china crystal glasses. Catching the light from the chandelier overhead, autumn-coloured flowers arranged in expensive vases down the centre of the table. Everyone was already in their seats. My father Richard sat at the head of the table looking distinguished in his navy blazer and tie, his silver hair perfectly combed. Brielle sat beside him looking like she had just stepped out of a fashion magazine in a cream-coloured designer dress, her dark hair cascading in perfect waves over her shoulders. The chatter died down as I walked in. All eyes turned to me. I felt like a specimen under a microscope, and from the looks on some faces, not a particularly impressive one. I was wearing a simple black dress and cardigan, the nicest clothes I owned, but compared to everyone else in the room, I looked like I had shown up to a gala in sweatpants. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence," my father said loudly, his voice booming across the room. Several people chuckled. "We were about to start without you, Avery." "I'm sorry," I said automatically, even though I had done nothing wrong. "Traffic was terrible." "Traffic?" my mother repeated with a derisive snort as she took her seat beside Brielle. "It's always something with you, isn't it?" She gestured dismissively at the pie in my hands. "Just put that on the dessert table in the kitchen. God knows we don't need another store-bought pie." "I made it from scratch," I said quietly, but no one was listening. I walked quickly through the dining room toward the kitchen, feeling the weight of judgmental stares following me. I could hear my Aunt Denise asking Brielle about her boutique, my Uncle Frank discussing golf with Richard, my cousin Chloe trying to wrangle her toddler. No one asked me how I was doing. No one ever did. I set the pie down on the kitchen counter next to 3 other elaborate desserts, including what looked like a professionally made tiramisu and a stunning pavlova. My chocolate cream pie looked pathetic in comparison. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and walked back to the dining room. The only empty seat was at the far end of the table, as far from my parents as possible, squeezed between my Aunt Susan and a family friend I barely knew. As I sat down, my father stood up holding a glass of wine. "Before we begin our meal, I'd like to say grace," he announced. Everyone bowed their heads. I did the same, but my mind was racing, anxiety prickling at the back of my neck. Something felt off. The air in the room was too charged, too tense. Richard began his prayer thanking God for family, for abundance, for blessings. I barely heard the words. And then just as he was wrapping up, my mother's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Before we eat, there's something we need to address," Carol said sharply, ignoring the fact that Richard was still mid-prayer. Several people looked up in confusion. My father frowned but didn't interrupt her. My mother's eyes locked onto mine from across the table and my blood ran cold. "Avery, Richard and I need to speak with you about a family matter, right now." "Can it wait until after dinner?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My heart was pounding. "No, it cannot wait," she said icily. "You have been dodging our calls for 2 weeks, and this is a time-sensitive issue." Brielle shifted in her seat, eyes down, but with a tiny smirk on her lips. My stomach dropped. This was a setup. They were about to ambush me in front of 30 witnesses. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My father cleared his throat, his expression stern. "Brielle is in a difficult situation," he began, his tone making it sound like I should already know what he was talking about. "She had to break her lease on her apartment early due to unforeseen circumstances, and the property management company is demanding she pay a $7,000 penalty for breach of contract. The payment is due within 24 hours or they're going to take legal action." I stared at him, then at Brielle, who was now dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, playing the part of the damsel in distress. $7,000. They wanted me to give Brielle $7,000. "I don't understand," I said slowly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because we need you to help your sister," my mother said, her voice sharp. "Family helps family, Avery. Or have you forgotten that—" The room had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching. I could feel my Aunt Susan tense beside me. "I can't," I said, my voice cracking. "I don't have that kind of money." "Don't lie to us," Richard barked. "You have a job. You've been working for years. You must have savings." "I have student loan debt, and I just paid $4,200 in emergency vet bills 2 weeks ago." I said, my face burning with humiliation, as I was forced to lay bare my financial situation in front of 30 people. "I'm barely making ends meet right now. I'm sorry, but I can't help Brielle with this." "Can't or won't," my mother hissed. "This is typical of you, Avery. Always so selfish. Always thinking only of yourself." "That's not fair," I said, my voice rising despite myself. I've never asked you for anything. I've paid my own way through everything. Meanwhile, you've been funding Brielle's entire lifestyle for years. How dare you, Carol said, her face flushing red. We've given you everything. We put a roof over your head, we fed you, we clothed you. Until I was 18, which is what parents are supposed to do. I shot back anger, finally overriding my fear. And even then you made me pay rent the summer after I graduated high school while Brielle lived here for free until she was 23. You're embarrassing this family, Richard said, standing up abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. Brielle is in crisis, and all you can talk about is yourself. What kind of sister are you? What kind of crisis? I asked, my voice shaking. She broke a lease. That's a choice she made. Why is that my responsibility? Because I'm your sister and I need you. Brielle finally spoke up, her voice small and trembling. Fresh tears streamed down her face. The pressure from trying to launch my boutique, from being an influencer, from managing everything. I had a breakdown. I couldn't stay in that apartment anymore. I thought you'd understand. I thought you'd have my back. It was a masterful performance. I almost believed her myself, but I knew Brielle. I had watched her manipulate our parents for decades. This was just another con and I was the mark. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said carefully, but I genuinely cannot give you $7,000. I don't have it. I'm in debt myself. You'll have to work out a payment plan with the property management company or ask Mum and Dad to help you. We've already helped her enough, Carol said coldly. It's your turn to step up. Or are you really going to let your sister get sued and potentially have her credit destroyed? This is unbelievable, I said, pushing my chair back from the table. You're really doing this right now, in front of everyone, on Thanksgiving. Sit down, Richard commanded, striding around the table toward me. We're not finished talking about this. Yes, we are, I said, standing my ground. My answer is no. I can't help her, and I won't be guilted into destroying my own financial stability for someone who has never had to work for anything in her life. That's when things got physical. Richard grabbed my wrist, his grip bruisingly tight. You ungrateful little brat, he snarled. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. Let go of me, I said, trying to pull away. My heart was hammering in my chest. Several people at this table stood up, murmuring in alarm. Richard, Aunt Denise said sharply. Let her go. This is getting out of hand. But he didn't let go. Instead, he yanked me forward, pulling me off balance. You're going to sit down, and we're going to talk about this like adults, he said through gritted teeth. I said let go, I shouted, jerking my arm back hard. That's when he shoved me. I didn't stumble. He shoved me hard. I flew backward and slammed into the antique crystal liquor cabinet against the wall. Glass exploded. Bottles of expensive whiskey and wine shattered everywhere. The sound was like a gunshot. I hit the floor hard, pain tearing through my back and shoulders. Tiny glass pieces cut into my palms as I tried to catch myself. For a moment there was absolute silence. Everyone in the room was frozen, staring in shock at what had just happened. Then my mother moved. She stormed over to where I was struggling to get up, glass crunching under her expensive heels. I looked up at her dazed and saw nothing but rage in her eyes. Look what you did, she screamed. That cabinet was worth $15,000. Do you have any idea what you've done? I started to say, but I never got to finish the sentence. Carol slapped me across the face so hard that my head snapped to the side. The impact was so brutal that I felt something warm and wet on my upper lip immediately. My nose was bleeding. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. Mum, stop, I heard Chloe shout from somewhere behind the ringing in my ears. You've destroyed this family, Carol said, her voice shaking with fury. You've always been a disappointment, but this is unforgivable. I sat there on the floor, surrounded by broken glass and spilled alcohol blood dripping from my nose onto my black dress, and something inside me snapped. Not like a breakdown, like a lock clicking open, like chains falling away. I looked up at the room full of people, some horrified, some uncomfortable, some looking away because they couldn't bear to witness what was happening. And then I saw Aunt Susan. She was standing near the doorway to the kitchen, her phone in her hand, pointing directly at the scene. She had been recording the entire interaction for her Thanksgiving Memories video. She had captured everything. The yelling, the shove, the violence, the slap. Everything. Our eyes met and she gave me the smallest nod. I wiped the blood from my face with the back of my hand, slowly got to my feet, despite the aching in my back, and looked directly at my parents. When I spoke, my voice was calm, cold, and completely steady. Everyone in this room just saw what happened, I said clearly. You can't twist this story. You can't make me the villain this time. You just assaulted me in front of 30 witnesses because I refused to give you money. You broke our cabinet, Richard sputtered. You shoved me into your cabinet, I corrected. And Mum, you struck me in the face hard enough to make my nose bleed in front of your entire family. Because I wouldn't give Brielle $7,000 that I don't have. I turned to look at all the people at the table. Some were watching with wide eyes, others looked down at their plates uncomfortable. "I want everyone here to remember this moment," I said. "Remember what they're really like behind closed doors. Remember that this is what they do when they don't get their way." Then I walked out, through the dining room, through the foyer, out the front door. I didn't grab my coat. I didn't say goodbye. I just left my nose still bleeding glass embedded in my palms, my entire body shaking with adrenaline. I drove home in a daze, my hands barely steady on the wheel. When I finally got back to my tiny apartment, I locked the door behind me, slid down to the floor, and sobbed. Not because I was sad, because I was free. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to them, and the worst had happened, and I had survived it. But I also knew it wasn't over. They weren't going to let this go. They never let anything go. I was right. The calls started within an hour. First from Richard's number, then Carol's, then Brielle's. I didn't answer any of them. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly as I sat in my bathroom, carefully pulling tiny pieces of glass from my palms with tweezers, my nose still tender and swollen from where my mother had hit me. Then the text messages came, dozens of them. First they tried the guilt angle. Messages from Brielle crying about how I had ruined Thanksgiving, how I had embarrassed her in front of everyone, how she couldn't believe her own sister would abandon her in her time of need. Then came the threats. Messages from Richard saying he was contacting his lawyer, that I was going to be sued for destruction of property, that I would pay for that liquor cabinet one way or another. Carol's messages were the worst, pure venom, telling me I was worthless, that I had always been a disappointment, that they wished they had never had me. Then at 2 a.m. came the voice message that I mentioned at the beginning of this story. My mother's voice, drunk and slurring, telling me they were going to destroy me, that they would make sure everyone knew what a horrible person I was, that they were pressing charges for assault and destruction of property. My father's voice in the background, equally drunk, talking about how he knew a judge, how I was going to end up in jail for attacking elderly people in their own home. I sat in the darkness of my apartment listening to the message 3 times, and with each replay, something changed inside me. The fear started to evaporate, replaced by cold, calculated anger. They thought they could terrorize me. They thought they could rewrite reality, make themselves the victims, and ruin my life. But they had made one critical mistake. They had done it all in front of witnesses. The next morning I woke up to a text message from Aunt Susan. It was short and to the point. "I have the video. All of it. Call me when you're ready." My hands were shaking as I dialed her number. She picked up on the first ring. "Avery, sweetheart, are you okay?" Her voice was warm, concerned, so different from the coldness I had experienced from my parents. "I don't know," I said honestly. "They're threatening to sue me, to press charges. They're saying I attacked them. That's complete garbage and everyone at that table knows it," Susan said firmly. "I recorded everything, honey. From the moment they ambushed you about the money, to when Richard shoved you into that cabinet, to when Carol hit you. It's all on video, crystal clear with audio." I felt tears welling up. "Thank you," I whispered. "I'm sending you the file right now," she said. "And I want you to know that I'm willing to testify if it comes to that. What they did was assault Avery. Plain and simple. You were defending yourself, setting a boundary, and they attacked you for it." After I hung up with Susan, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from my cousin Chloe. "Hey, I just want you to know that I saw everything last night and I'm on your side. What they did was horrific. If you need a witness statement or anything, I'm here. So are my brothers. We've watched them treat you like garbage for years, and we're done staying silent." Then another message came through. This one from Mr. Harrison, a family friend and neighbour who had been seated near the window. "Avery, this is Tom Harrison. I'm an attorney, and I witnessed the incident last night through the dining room window as I was arriving late. I saw your father shove you and your mother strike you. What happened to you was domestic battery. And I would like to offer my services pro bono if you wish to pursue legal action or need protection from harassment. Please call me at your earliest convenience." I sat on my couch staring at my phone messages of support pouring in from family members I had barely spoken to in years, all of them expressing shock and disgust at what they had witnessed. The narrative my parents were trying to spin was crumbling before it even had a chance to take root. For the first time in 24 hours, I felt something other than fear. I felt power. I called Mr. Harrison later that afternoon. He was professional, kind, and most importantly strategic. He explained that what my parents had done constituted domestic battery, even though I was an adult because we were in a family setting, and they had used physical force against me. He also explained that their subsequent threats via phone and text could be classified as harassment and intimidation. "You have grounds for a temporary restraining order," he said. And given the video evidence and witness testimony, I'd say your chances of getting it approved are excellent. Additionally, if they try to sue you for property damage, we have clear video evidence that your father's assault caused the damage, not any action on your part. What do I need to do? I asked. First, we document everything. Save every text message, every voicemail, every call log. Second, we get statements from your witnesses. Third, we file for a TRO. And fourth, we send a cease and desist letter to your parents, making it clear that any further contact will result in legal consequences. It took 3 days to put everything together. Susan sent me the video file, which I could barely watch without feeling sick. Watching my father grab me, shove me, watching my mother slap me while I was bleeding on the floor. It was surreal, like watching something happen to someone else. But it was also irrefutable evidence. Chloe and her 2 brothers sent notarized statements. Mr. Harrison wrote his own witness account. Even some of the other guests who had been at the dinner reached out, offering to testify if needed. On Monday morning, exactly 5 days after Thanksgiving, Mr. Harrison filed for a temporary restraining order on my behalf. That same day, he sent a formal letter to my parents via certified mail, informing them that any further contact with me outside of the legal system would be considered harassment and would be reported to the police. He included a copy of the TRO filing and a very clear message I was pursuing legal action. I had multiple witnesses and video evidence, and if they continued their threats, they would be facing criminal charges for assault and battery. The response was immediate and explosive. My phone started ringing off the hook, but now from extended family members, telling me that Richard and Carol were having a meltdown. They had apparently called an emergency family meeting, trying to get people to take their side, painting me as a vindictive daughter who was trying to ruin them. But the tide had turned. Too many people had seen what really happened. Too many people were tired of watching them get away with their toxic behaviour. That's when Aunt Denise called me. "Avery," she said, her voice warm and firm. "I'm having a second Thanksgiving dinner at my house this Saturday. A do-over, and I want you to come. I've invited everyone who was at Richard and Carol's house that night, and I've made it very clear that your parents are not welcome unless they're ready to issue a public apology and take accountability for what they did." "Are they coming?" I asked, my stomach knotting up. "Oh, they're coming," Denise said with a dark chuckle. "Carol called me screaming about family loyalty and how I was taking sides. I told her that I'm taking sides. I'm taking the side of the person who was assaulted in my brother's home. She hung up on me, but I know they'll show up. They can't resist the opportunity to try to control the narrative. I don't know if I can face them," I admitted. "You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with," Denise assured me. "But I think it might be good for you to have your moment, to stand in front of the family and tell your truth with all of us backing you up." I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to hide, to just let the legal system handle everything and never see my parents again. But another part of me, the part that had been silenced and diminished for 28 years, wanted to face them, wanted to watch them squirm, wanted justice. "I'll be there," I said. That Saturday evening, I pulled up to Aunt Denise's house in suburban Hartford. It was a beautiful, colonial, warm and inviting, nothing like the cold showplace my parents maintained. As I walked up to the door, my heart was pounding. The bruise on my face had faded to a yellowish green, but it was still visible. I had decided not to cover it with makeup. I wanted people to see it. Denise opened the door and pulled me into a tight hug. "You're so brave," she whispered. "Come on in. Most everyone's already here." I walked into her living room and was overwhelmed by the warmth. Chloe rushed over and hugged me. Susan took my hand and squeezed it. Even some of the family friends I barely knew came up to tell me they were proud of me for standing up for myself. And then I saw them. Richard and Carol were sitting stiffly on the couch in the corner, looking deeply uncomfortable. Brielle was with them, her eyes red-rimmed, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. No one was sitting near them. They had been socially quarantined. When Carol saw me, she immediately stood up. "Avery," she said, her voice sharp. "We need to talk. Privately." I stayed exactly where I was. "No," I said simply. "No more private conversations. No more closed doors. Everything you have to say to me, you can say in front of everyone here." Her face flushed red. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not being ridiculous," I said calmly. "I'm setting a boundary. If you want to speak to me, you do it here in front of witnesses." Richard stood up too, his face hardening. "This is inappropriate." "What's inappropriate?" Aunt Denise interjected, stepping forward. "Is what you two did to your daughter in my brother's dining room last week. Avery has every right to protect herself." The room had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. Carol's eyes narrowed. "You've turned this entire family against us with your lies," she hissed at me. "I haven't said a word," I replied. "I didn't need to. Everyone saw what you did with their own eyes." "That's right," Susan said, stepping forward. Her phone was in her hand. And since we're all here, and since there seems to be some confusion about what actually happened that night, I think it's time everyone heard the truth. She connected her phone to Denise's Bluetooth speaker. I was recording what I thought would be sweet family moments that night, Susan announced to the room. What I captured instead was something very different. Carol's face went white. Susan, don't you dare. Oh, I dare, Susan said coolly. She pressed play. The audio filled the room, crystal clear. Every word of the argument, Richard's voice commanding me to sit down, my voice saying let go of me, the crash of me hitting the liquor cabinet, the gasps from the guests. Carol's scream about the cabinet, and then the unmistakable sound of a slap, followed by my voice shaky but clear, pointing out that everyone had witnessed what just happened. The silence after the recording ended was deafening. Several people were crying. Others looked horrified, even though they had been there. Hearing it played back made it even more real, more visceral. That Chloe said standing up is what domestic violence sounds like. Brielle was the first to try to salvage the situation. She laughed a nervous, high-pitched sound. Okay, that sounds bad, but you guys have to understand it was just a family disagreement that got a little heated. People fight. It happens. That wasn't a fight, Denise said, her voice cold as ice. That was assault. That was a grown man physically attacking his daughter and a mother striking her child in the face hard enough to cause a nosebleed. All because she wouldn't give you money she doesn't have. We raised her, Richard said defensively. We gave her everything. She owed us. She owed you nothing, Mr. Harrison spoke up from where he stood by the fireplace. Children don't owe their parents financial restitution for being raised. That's your job as parents. And what you did crossed every legal and moral line imaginable. This is insane, Carol said, her voice shaking. You're all ganging up on us. Avery has manipulated all of you. Really, I said, stepping forward. My voice was steady, clear, and for the first time in my life I felt completely in control. Let's talk about manipulation. Let's talk about the 28 years you've made me feel worthless because I wasn't Brielle. Let's talk about every holiday where you belittled me, every birthday where my gift was an afterthought, every success I achieved that you ignored while throwing parties for Brielle's mediocre accomplishments. Let's talk about how you've funded her entire adult life while I've worked myself to the bone, and the one time I set a boundary and said no, you physically attacked me. You're being dramatic, Carol said weakly. I have a temporary restraining order against both of you, I said. It's being reviewed by a judge on Tuesday. Mr. Harrison is prepared to escalate this to criminal charges if necessary. You're facing potential charges of domestic battery and harassment. The blood drained from Richard's face. You wouldn't. I already did, I said. And here's what else I did. Remember Brielle's boutique? The one she's been running as an influencer side hustle? Brielle's head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. I did some digging, I continued. Turns out she's been involved in some questionable business practices. Lying about product sourcing, not properly reporting income for tax purposes, and allegedly scamming several customers who never received their orders. I compiled all the evidence I could find, including screenshots from dissatisfied customers and financial discrepancies, and I sent a detailed report to the company that manages her boutique platform and to the IRS. Brielle's face went from pale to green. You didn't? I did, I said calmly. Because you know what? Actions have consequences. You wanted to ruin me financially by trying to force me to give you $7,000 I don't have. Well, now you're going to face an audit, potential legal action from your business partners, and quite possibly the loss of your boutique entirely. You vindictive bitch, Brielle shrieked, jumping to her feet. Sit down, Denise commanded. You don't get to play victim here, Brielle. You've been enabled and coddled your entire life while your sister suffered. This ends now. I looked around the room at all the faces watching me. Some looked shocked, others looked proud. And for the first time in my entire life I felt like I belonged. Not because I had bent myself into a pretzel to earn their love, but because I had stood up for myself and they respected that. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said, my voice quieter now but no less firm. I'm doing this for accountability. For 28 years you three have operated under the assumption that you could treat me however you wanted and there would be no consequences. That I would just take it because I was too afraid of losing my family. But here's what I've learned. A family that requires you to destroy yourself to keep them happy isn't a family worth keeping. Avery, Richard started, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished, I said. I want to make something very clear to everyone in this room. As of today, I am officially cutting contact with Richard, Carol and Brielle. I've changed my phone number. I'm moving to a new apartment next month and none of you will have the address. All communication, if there must be any, will go through my attorney. I am done being your scapegoat. I am done being your emotional and financial safety net. I am done sacrificing my well-being for people who have never once considered mine. You can't do this, Carol said, and for the first time I heard something other than anger in her voice. I heard fear. We're your parents. You stopped being my parents a long time ago, I said softly. You became my abusers. The words hung in the air and I saw Carol flinch like I had physically struck her. This family meeting is over for you three, Denise said firmly, walking to the door and opening it. You need to leave. Now. You're kicking us out, Richard said, incredulous. Yes, Denise said. And let me be clear. You are not welcome at any family gathering until you have sought professional help, undergone family counselling, and issued a genuine public apology to Avery for what you've done. And even then, it will be Avery's choice whether she ever wants to see you again. Susan, Carol turned to her sister desperately. I agree with Denise, Susan said firmly. What you did was unforgivable. I'm ashamed to call you my sister right now. One by one, other family members spoke up, agreeing. Richard, Carol, and Brielle were effectively excommunicated, voted off the family island by unanimous decision. They left in humiliated silence, and the moment the door closed behind them, I felt something release in my chest. Something that had been locked tight for decades. After they were gone, Denise put her arm around me. How are you doing, sweetheart? I'm okay, I said, and I realised I meant it. Actually, I'm better than okay. The rest of the evening was surreal. People came up to me throughout the night apologising for not speaking up sooner, for not seeing how bad things were, for enabling my parents' behaviour by staying silent. My Uncle Frank, who had always seemed aloof, pulled me aside and pressed an envelope into my hand. This is from several of us, he said gruffly. We took up a collection. It should be enough to help with your student loans and get you back on your feet. I opened the envelope later and found cheques totalling $6,000 from various family members. I cried. Chloe's husband, who worked in tech, offered to help me get a better paying job at his company. Susan offered to let me stay with her for free while I looked for a new apartment. Mr. Harrison assured me that he would handle any legal issues that arose from my parents or Brielle completely pro bono. For the first time in my life, I felt supported. I felt valued. I felt loved, not because of what I could do for others, but simply because I existed and deserved kindness. It's been 3 months since that Thanksgiving. The temporary restraining order was made permanent after my parents violated it by showing up at my workplace to talk sense into me. They now legally cannot come within 500 feet of me. Brielle's boutique was shut down after an investigation revealed she owed over $20,000 in back taxes and had scammed dozens of customers. She's currently living back at home with our parents, who are reportedly struggling financially after having to pay her tax penalties and legal fees. I'm living in a new apartment, courtesy of Aunt Susan, who refused to let me pay rent for the first 6 months. I started a new job at my cousin's husband's company, making almost double what I was making before. I paid off my credit card debt and made a significant dent in my student loans with the money from my family members. Most importantly, I started therapy to work through the years of emotional abuse and gaslighting. I'm learning to recognise my own worth, to set boundaries without guilt, and to build a life that serves me, not others. My parents have tried to reach out through various means, flying monkeys and third parties, always with the same message that I'm tearing the family apart, that I'm being dramatic, that if I would just come home and apologise, everything could go back to normal. But I know better now. Normal was never healthy. Normal was me being slowly destroyed for the comfort of everyone else. So here's what I want you to take away from this story. If you're in a toxic relationship, whether it's with family, a partner, or friends, you don't owe them your destruction. Setting boundaries is not selfish. Protecting yourself is not cruel. And walking away from people who hurt you is not betrayal. It's survival. It's self-love. It's the bravest thing you can do. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you deserve. And that's okay. You can build a new family from the people who truly love and respect you. You can choose yourself without being the villain. You can demand accountability without being vindictive. I'm not going to lie and say everything is perfect now. I still have hard days. I still sometimes feel guilty for breaking up the family, even though logically I know I didn't break anything that wasn't already shattered. But I also have peace, real genuine peace, and freedom, and a future that belongs entirely to me. That's what I gained by finally saying no, by finally choosing myself, by finally believing that I deserved better. And you know what? So do you. So let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself safe? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments below. Let's support each other. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe for more real life stories about boundaries and self-respect, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes we all need a reminder that we're not alone, and that it's okay to walk away from toxicity, even when it's wrapped in the word family. Thank you for listening, and remember, you are not responsible for other people's bad behaviour. You are only responsible for how you respond to it. Choose yourself, always.